Hey everyone, Paris Jackson here, aka Benny's dad, back with another video for you this week. Happy Friday. Hope you guys all enjoyed last week's video about how I built my first 10K portfolio. And as I was going back and reviewing my own content, as we all love to do, I just realized that maybe I had skipped an important step that comes before going on your own personal investment journey, and that is building the emergency fund. So I figured I'd come back this week and talk about my view on the emergency fund, what's the conventional wisdom of an emergency fund, what constitutes an emergency to be used on said fund, and then how my view differs from the conventional view, especially with someone that's in, my position. So we'll talk about that. So without further ado, get my screen pulled up here and kind of walk you through the basics of an emergency fund. So make sure to watch all the way to the end so you get my take on, how I view the cash on the sideline situation. But let's get going right into it. So first things first here, what is a financial emergency, right? And why do we need this fund of cash on the side? So a financial emergency, just to quickly ping through these, are, if you lose your job and you don't have any source of income, if you have a medical emergency, if you have some major home repairs, if something may happen to your car or your mode of transportation that gets you to and from work, that may double if you're like an Uber driver or somebody that commutes for work. If you lose your job or you lose your car, one might lead to losing the other. And then unexpected travel, death in the family or a medical emergency for a family member where you have to get up and go. Like, I would consider all of these things financial emergencies. And one of the definitions that I saw online from, I believe it's the Money Guys, if you watch them, is, hey, was this necessary and was this unexpected, right? That would be considered a financial emergency, right? I actually think it's Dave Ramsey that put that together, one of those guys out there. But that's what constitutes a financial emergency, right? It's like, hey, I gotta have cash to pay for these things. I don't necessarily want to use a credit card to pay for them with debt and avoid debt. So I need to have cash on the sidelines. And that's kind of like the conventional thought process around why you need an emergency fund, right? Because you don't want to tap debt necessarily with no income. Like if you lose your job or something like that, you don't necessarily want to turn to lines of credit where you're just digging yourself a financial hole. That's why you want cash on the sidelines. Now, if I can just take a step back for a second and just talk about another reason to just have cash on the sidelines is that for investment opportunities. Now, we're going through a very tumultuous time in the market. I mean, the overall market's down 10%. The NASDAQ's down near bear territories or over 10%, between 10 and 20%. The market continues to drop. And a great reason to have cash on the sidelines is for opportunities to invest in the stock market. Now, I'm a big proponent of just putting money in every time you get paid, paying yourself first, 401ks, Roth IRAs, things of that nature. Like, please don't misunderstand. I definitely want you to be dollar cost averaging. But at the same time, it's also nice to have some money on the sidelines to do some extra investing in the event that the market goes down. So I would add that, not to a financial emergency, but reasons to have a healthy amount of cash, which kind of ties into, the financial emergency thing. Now, I think where I differ from conventional wisdom is in terms of how much is actually recommended for the emergency fund. So conventional wisdom will say about 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. And then you should have in cash saved somewhere that's liquid, like a high yield savings account or something like that. The reason you don't want it necessarily invested in something like, the S&P 500 or, in a retirement account is obviously when you pull from those funds, like a retirement account, you will run into potential penalties and taxes for pulling from those funds. Specifically if you pull from your 401k or your Roth IRA and you're not 59 and a half, you're subject to a 10% penalty plus wherever you fall in the tax bracket. So between 20 and 35%, depending on your state, you'll have to also pay in taxes. So, if you can imagine, for every $100 you take off, you pay a 10% penalty plus an additional $25 in taxes. So your 100 turns into 65, and you end up having to take out more to have the same amount. And that's in your retirement account. Now, if you have it invested, you don't really want to interrupt that compound growth, and you don't want to incur taxes. So that's why you want this money kind of sitting in cash somewhere, so that it's easy to get to. The speed of which it comes out is very quick. And also, you just don't interrupt any compound growth and end up, basically costing your future self way more because you're ill prepared for an emergency. Now, so the conventional wisdom is that you save between 3 and 6 months of expenses. And basically, the way that that's formulated is you take your monthly income, and you could say, hey, this is what I make over 3 to 6 months, and you sock it away, which works great if you don't have variable income. And you get paid like if you're on a salary job or an hourly job, you work pretty consistent, your paychecks don't change a lot. But it doesn't work great if you're commission-based or project-based or a 1099 person where you have very variable income. So in those cases, I'd recommend likely focusing on your overall expenses, right? What does 1 month of expenses of bare necessities look like? Essential costs like 4 walls, utilities, and food, right? What does that look like for 3 to 6 months? And then you also have to take in different, dependents, your job security, and things of that nature. The last few points on here, are where you can start to skew from that conventional wisdom. And I just want to show really quick, just an example of what this might look like when you're doing your own emergency fund. So this is taken directly from my own personal, if I can zoom in here, my own personal budget and what I spend my expenses on. So I'm gonna blow this up here. Hopefully that's a little bit more clear for you. And let me do this, make life easy. Come back over here. Moving at the speed of sound here. Okay, so hopefully that's nice and big so you can see even if you're on your phone. So I just took this most recent quarter and I broke things out into a few different categories just so you can see what a 3-month emergency fund would look like for me, right? So I took January, February, March, and I broke the categories into 5 different categories, right? I have my home costs plus utilities. So this is my mortgage, my internet bill, light bill, trash, everything all together, right? And then I also have subscriptions. I have a fair amount of subscriptions, the usuals, Hulu's, a gym subscription, things of that nature. And then I have my car expenses. I have variable expenses, which for me, variable expenses obviously change month to month, right? They're not fixed costs. You can get an average, but they definitely vary a lot more based on the activities that I have. And this includes, a going out budget, for alcohol and things of that, and Ubers, right, for when I'm on the town. And then just food, like groceries, eating out, all falls under those like variable expenses. So you get huge swings in those. And then the miscellaneous cost total is everything else. The things that you don't pay for regularly, things for the house, things for, gifts, medical expenses that pop up like dentist or something like that, things that like are irregular, but still take a total. So using these numbers, if I was to do a conventional emergency fund, right, I would take all of these numbers for the past quarter, which is 3 months, and I would set aside this number in the bottom right here of $13,371 as my emergency fund, right? In cash, sitting somewhere in like a high yield savings where it's nice and liquid. In the event that I lose my job and don't want to change anything at all. And going back to, the talk about a financial emergency, right? Like if I'm having a financial emergency, I either lost my job, I got hit by a bus or something, and can't work. Like those are things that I would consider like a financial emergency. And having 3 months of expenses is very nice. It gives me plenty of time to either heal or find a new job should those things happen. But it may be too much saved, right? And here's the logic behind that. And if you find yourself in a situation that's the same, you could tweak these numbers, right? So at 3 to 6 months, I'd have between, let's just round up for easy, 15 and 30,000 just sitting in cash somewhere. And when I think to myself of the emergencies that could happen in my life and try to think of how I would use all that money, it's a little bit hard to think of, right? Going back to that list of financial emergencies, well, it's like, do I lose my job? Well, I mean, for me, if you're in a situation like I am, like I've been with my company for a really long time. The company itself is in really sound footing and shape and doesn't have any like, looming bankruptcies coming in anytime soon. I myself in my position am pretty stable. So I think the risk of me losing my job is fairly low when I think about, job security, right? So then the next one would be, medical emergencies. It's like, okay, well, I think I'm pretty healthy. I take care of myself. I go for my annual checkups. I go to the dentist on a pretty irregular basis. Through my job, I have decent insurance. So I know what my deductibles are. And do I really need to set aside, tens of thousands of dollars for medical expenses? Not really, right? Like if I was at a point where, maybe I had kids, or if maybe, my wife needed to come on my insurance or something like that, and she didn't have her own, or, something of that nature, maybe I would consider, stocking up more for just overall medical expenses. But like, I feel pretty confident in my health. Pray for me that I don't walk out of here and get hit by a bus now. But overall, I feel really good about where I am in a health standpoint, and I feel like I have really good job security. So now, outside of that, going back to the reasons from before, there's not very many that would constitute an emergency needing tens of thousands of dollars, right? And I look at this list: major home repairs. I purchased my home very recently. It was a brand new build. I don't think that there's going to be home repairs. So for me, going through these, hey, could this happen? Could this happen? Could this happen? Well, the answer is always yes, right? Could these things happen? Yes. The probability of them happening is low, right? So I think that's where my personal view differs largely from, the conventional wisdom when it comes to, saving an emergency fund. And I understand that people really like to paint with broad strokes, but I think people miss out on, hey, but what about if you're in a pretty good, stable situation, right? And so I just wanted to bring that to light and talk about emergency funds and how I view it. So instead of 3 to 6 months, I'm much more comfortable, with 1 to 2 months in an emergency fund, because in the event that I lose my job, I don't think that it'll take much longer than a month to actually source a new job with similar incomes. And then if I do a full month of expenses, I still, in the event of emergency, I would probably cut a lot of these things out, right? Like in the event that I am truly like out of money, well, I would probably cut my subscriptions and save a few $100. The variable expenses, going out to the bars and going out, ordering Ubers and eating out, well, that goes away as well as this miscellaneous total down here. So if I take away this and I take away the subscriptions, we're talking about $900 a month, not needed of the average that I have down here. So with that, I'm much more comfortable saving less in cash, knowing that I can cut some of these expenses if needed, right? Like, so on average, I need about 4,100, including all of these different expenses. But if I'm able to cut out these different, odds and ends from my overall budget, that reduces the average pretty substantially. And we're in a much better place. What the heck is going on here? Hold on. There we go. That reduces the average by about $400. Just averaging, the different things out, right? An average of 218 here and another average of 600. So that's really like 800 of this 4,100 that's coming off. So I'd need about 3,400 saved. And if I did that for 2 months, right? Let's say, oh, okay, I lose my job, things are going absolutely horribly. What am I going to do? And then I cut these things. Well, now I only need about $7,000 to last 2 months, and that's only cutting subscriptions and ancillary spending in terms of like odds and ends and things for the house and gifts. And I could just break it to people, hey, it's not really a great time for me to be purchasing gifts or going out as much. I'm actually looking for a new job. It's a little bit of an emergency right now, but that's okay because I saved X amount. So for me personally, and hopefully this extends to you and was helpful in building your own emergency fund, you got to look at a few different factors. Hey, how stable is my job? How good is my health? What is my health insurance? What are my deductibles? What are the things that would necessitate an emergency, and how am I able to react to those when they pop up? And evaluate for yourself when you have an emergency. And what I'll leave you with here is, conventional wisdom isn't right for everyone, right? Your situation is unique. Like, I don't advise that you just blindly follow advice and say, well, all the experts say I need 3 to 6 months of expenses sitting in cash, like at all times. Like, I really encourage you not to follow that conventional wisdom, and just analyze your own needs, analyze and adjust accordingly. Like for me, my biggest thing was, hey, I don't really need 6 months of cash. I'm not going to have that type of emergency. I would rather take that money and plug it into my investment vehicles, so that they can grow and compound at much higher rates. And this was back before, savings accounts were offering 3, 4, 5%, right? They're offering 0.01 at most major banks, or, less than 1%. Can I go get an 8, 9, 10, 11 from the S&P 500, and start growing my wealth and really supercharge my wealth rather than just sitting it in cash, where inflation is going to eat away most of the value anyway. So if you are somebody that likes to prepare and likes to shelter, and you feel more comfortable and you feel like you need more cash, by all means, please do it. Like, I still add to my cash pile. But I do that after hitting the rest of my investment goals. And we'll talk next week about, total asset allocation. And I'll kind of end this video here. But hopefully this helps in how you determine what is a good emergency fund for you. And, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe, comment down below. What's your plan? How many months do you have set aside in cash ready to go? And we will catch you on the next one.